The next industrial revolution is here, and it's powered by AI. The US and China may dominate, but is Europe ready to close the gap? Nvidia is betting big on Europe. New AI factories, powerful chips, and bold predictions. The continent may be late to the AI party, but Nvidia reckons it is catching up. The CEO of ARM says the chips are ready, but Europe's grid is not. Rene Haas warns the UK and the rest of the continent face a power problem.
The UK and Europe, the energy needs are not in the tens of megawatts, they're in the gigawatt range. And if you look across what really is being generated, UK and or Europe, that scale's not there, and that's the gap.
And we ask, is Europe moving fast enough in the artificial intelligence race? We get a view from our panel of investors. Welcome to Bloomberg Tech Europe. It is our new show. We're going to be spotlighting the biggest names and trends shaping the region's technology ecosystem as that global competition heats up. Let's kick off then with a look at the hot button topic of artificial intelligence and how Europe's startups are taking on their much bigger American rivals.
Coal for steam and power, the power behind the Industrial Revolution.
The world's next industrial revolution isn't being powered by coal or oil. This time, the most valuable resource is artificial intelligence. And while Silicon Valley often steals the headlines, Europe certainly is not out of the race. From London to Lyon, Munich to Milan, a new generation of AI startups is emerging. But the money and the scale is often smaller. Last year, America's AI companies secured more than 7 times the funding of their European rivals. And patents related to AI in the US outnumber those from Europe by a factor of 3 to 1. But Europe is finding ways to carve out a niche. It's now neck and neck with China on investment, closing a big gap from a few years ago. And Europe is betting its AI sector can punch above its weight when it comes to innovation. Wave, based in the UK, has raised over $1 billion to teach cars to drive like humans. In Germany, DeepL is quietly taking on Google Translate and winning market share. And Synthesia in London lets anyone create a video without ever stepping in front of a camera. The UK, Germany and France are the region's big players, the only European countries to make it into the global top 10 for AI funding last year. And the UK is far ahead. It's home to 20 AI unicorns and more than 2,300 AI startups backed by venture capital. The question now, can Europe turn its cautious optimism into global leadership?
Well, one company which is undoubtedly a global leader in the AI space is, of course, Nvidia. And its CEO is making a bold bet on Europe. Jensen Huang reckons the continent's AI computing power will grow tenfold in just 2 years. Tenfold in just 2 years, thanks to more than 20 so-called AI factories now in the pipeline.
Europe has now awakened to the importance of these AI factories, the importance of the AI infrastructure. We will increase the amount of AI computing capacity in Europe by a factor of 10. And so the researchers, the startups, your AI shortage, your GPU shortage will be resolved for you soon. It's coming for you.
Across Europe, Nvidia is working with 1.5 million developers as well as thousands of startups in what the company calls its Inception program. In France, it's deploying 18,000 of its new Blackwell chips with AI startup Mistral. In Germany, it's building an industrial AI cloud to supercharge manufactories. And here in the UK, it says the opportunity is big, but the infrastructure is lagging.
UK is in a Goldilocks circumstance. Between these two ideas that you're rich with great computer scientists, it's a fantastic place for VCs to invest, the ecosystem is really perfect for takeoff. It's just missing one thing. It is surprising, this is the largest AI ecosystem in the world, without its own infrastructure.
Well, from Nvidia to one of its biggest collaborators and competitors, chip designer ARM CEO Rene Haas, also citing the lack of infrastructure as one of the reasons holding back the UK and the rest of Europe's progress on AI. He spoke to me at the Founders Forum Global Conference.
One of the challenges the continent has and the UK has is simply just around the infrastructure and capital, because these are large projects. And just candidly, Tom, driven by so much demand for compute. For ARM, the good news is that we're the center of it. And we couldn't have been more proud when the Stargate project was announced. The only CPU architecture that was mentioned that's the heart of that data center is ARM.
But there's a bottleneck potentially for Europe and the UK when it comes to both energy and the infrastructure and that AI movement.
Yeah, I think when you look at what's driving all this demand for compute, as the smarter these models get, and smarter I'm going to put in quotes, the way it's largely being addressed today is throwing more chips, throwing more power, and throwing more capital at it, because the models are, I don't know if they're getting smarter, but what they're doing by getting smarter is they're just frankly throwing more compute at it. Back to the UK and Europe, the energy needs are not in the tens of megawatts, they're in the gigawatt range. And if you look across what really is being generated, UK and or Europe, that scale's not there, and that's the gap.
You've positioned ARM to take a bigger slice of the data center market with some success as well. But computing or AI on the edge, on our devices, whether it's our smartwatches or our smartphones or other devices, when does that become a bigger slice of the market versus the data center? How do you think about that balance between the amount of AI inference we're doing on data centers versus actually on our device?
Yeah, so ARM exists everywhere. We are in 300 billion devices since we were incepted, 30 billion devices just in the last year. And just by way of context, 200 million laptops approximately was shipped in the last year. So when you look at that scale, ARM is everywhere. So we have a very good lens in terms of what workloads are running where. Now, to your direct question, we view AI at the highest level as another software workload. And history has taught us that over time, workloads run in a combination of a local device and a cloud device for reasons of latency, security, efficiency, et cetera, et cetera. So then you ask the question, well, why hasn't that happened yet? The AI models are moving so rapidly that it's been very difficult for the hardware to catch up. Data point. If you have a mobile phone, smartphone, that phone that you bought in the last 6 months, that went into production probably 6 months prior. The chip that was designed for that phone probably went into production a year earlier, so let's say 2023. The IP that ARM developed for that phone was probably developed in 2022, and we started thinking about the ideas in 2021. You couldn't spell a large language model in 2021. People were not thinking about running AI at the edge. So the challenge that we get, and for engineers, it's very much a first world problem because we love to work on very difficult things, such as how do we develop chips and IP that's more efficient, that can run these workloads, but it takes time.
ARM CEO Rene Haas speaking to me at Founders Forum. OpenAI's chief operating officer, meanwhile, says the company is seeing increased appetite from governments and businesses in Europe wanting access to its AI tools. Brad Lightcap recently took over day-to-day running of the AI leader and says the competitive gap between Europe and the US and China is not as big as some might think.
We really do feel just an incredible amount of enthusiasm and excitement from Europe. It's why we're here. And I don't expect that to abate at any point. So, you know, in some sense, these things are kind of self-deterministic, right? It's the appetite that businesses have to want to drive transformation. Yeah. It's the appetite that governments have to want to build infrastructure. It's the appetite that people have to want to really use these tools to do new things, that artists have to be able to use these tools to do new things. We see that just as much in Europe as we see it in the United States.
If there was one thing that you would prescribe that governments could do to help close what is, many would say, is still a gap, what would it be in Europe?
I think it's access, right? You've got to make sure people are using the best tools. And one of the surprising things that we've seen is we tended to think that there'd be at some point where we just continue to build better and better models, but people kind of don't benefit proportionally to how much the model has improved between generations. And that's not true. What we see in practice is every time we make the model better, people find new ways to get value out of it. They find new things to do with it. Businesses find new use cases to deploy it into. And so as we continue to push the frontier, we just think it's absolutely critical that people have access to the best tools.
Does it matter that Europe only has one large language model company, Mistral? Does that keep us constrained?
I don't think so. I think that people will ultimately gravitate to where the best models are, whether that's with OpenAI or another company. And it's on OpenAI to make sure that the models that we build serve the needs of the people that want to use them. I think that's true of any other company building models.
Okay, where do you think Europe can accrue the most value in AI?
Ultimately, look, I think the application layer is going to be the most interesting, right? It's where you actually come into contact with reality, and these models have to perform.
OpenAI's Chief Operating Officer Brad Lightcap speaking to me exclusively here in London. The chief executive, meanwhile, of the Finnish gaming company Supercell has told me he's very bullish on European tech. The maker of games including Heyday and Clash of Clans enjoyed a record year in 2024. Ilkka Pannanen told me Europe should stop worrying about keeping up with the US.
Well, if I'm honest, I'm pretty tired of this endless comparisons to Silicon Valley. I don't think we here in Europe should try to build the next Silicon Valley. I think we should build the next version of Europe. And Europe has some very special sort of advantages and there are things that make Europe special. It's very diverse, rich culture. Europe is a fantastic place to live. It's very stable. There's a lot of trust in Europe, etc., etc. So let's, make our own version of Europe and let's make Europe better rather than looking at everybody else.
What is your prescription then for getting to that place, a better version of European tech?
Well, in fact, I think we are well on our way to get there. Oftentimes people forget that, Silicon Valley was born maybe 60, 70 years ago. In Europe, we've been doing this thing, at some sort of scale, maybe 20 years, probably less than that. And if you look at the kind of pace of development in Europe, they're moving very, very fast. And, for example, the European founder network has never been as strong as it's today. These other founders helping the next generation of entrepreneurs to build even more valuable companies. So all of those things make me super bullish on the future of Europe.
Supercell CEO Ilkka Pannanen speaking to me last week. Coming up, can Europe catch up in the AI race? Then we're going to discuss that next with our panel of fantastic investors. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Tech Europe. Now, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer recently announced plans to train millions of people in AI over the next 5 years, while Europe is aiming to mobilise 200 billion euros for investment in the technology. But is it too little too late? With me to discuss, I'm very pleased to say, is Carina Namih, partner at VC firm Plural, Laura McGinnis, principal at Balderton, and Tommy Stadlen, co-founder and general partner at Giant Ventures. All, of course, VC firms that have backed some really serious names in Europe and elsewhere. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I was at an event last year. Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, of course, stood up and he said, Europe, you have decided not to compete. Carina, is he right?
I love a controversial opener. I think that is clearly not the case. It may have been a while ago, but now we are feeling a real change of tone and a vibe shift in Europe. I think people are incredibly energized and recognizing that we have a real depth of talent here. We have increasingly the scar tissue and the experience amongst the founder community, people who've built successful businesses, exited those, come back into the ecosystem as investors like us at Plural, and are seeing incredible opportunities across the spectrum, from applied AI to material science to nuclear fusion. There are incredible innovations happening in Europe.
And that scar tissue is really important. I know you at Plural and the team at Plural lean into that. And you have your own scar tissue. Tommy, as do you, in terms of building a business. But you look back kind of 13 years or so, you had to move to the US, but now that would be different, is the argument maybe you're making, Tommy. Talk to us about the importance of scar tissue and your lessons.
Yeah, well, I started a startup as a Londoner in 2013, and I felt I had to move to California. Not enough talent here, not enough capital. We ended up selling that business to Microsoft, and there were definitely not acquirers like Microsoft knocking around in London. So I felt I had to move. When I moved back, became an investor and started Giant, and we're investing in Europe as well as the US, that has just totally changed. So London is now, I think, the number 3 in the world as a venture capital market. We've got, as you were saying, incredible AI talent, incredible biotech talent. We still don't have the exits, and that's, gonna come. Silicon Valley was not born in a day, built in a day, and so that will take some time. And I think what we really lack is the kind of big US tech giants. So someone like Amazon, their R&D budget is bigger than the entire UK private sectors. And Nvidia, which we've been talking a lot about today already, that's almost as big in terms of market cap as the entire FTSE. And not having that big scale does come with challenges. It means there are not enough acquirers. Our public markets, which you and I have talked about in the past, are a real challenge in terms of the public market investors here not valuing technology and growth. So, of course, we've still got challenges. But Eric Schmidt is just wrong. We are competing. We're competing very, very hard, and we've got all the tools to win.
Laura, when it comes to the infrastructure piece, we had a reminder today of just how much capital is being put to play in terms of the infrastructure on AI, with Masayoshi Son of SoftBank pitching a $1 trillion project in Arizona to kind of build a Shenzhen of the US at a time when we're looking at the UK Prime Minister committing £1 billion, $1 trillion. I mean, to what extent is the gap caused by the fact that we do not have the infrastructure and we do not have the capital to fund that?
Yeah, I think, interesting question. I would say that I think about it as it's not the same race or not the same game per se. So when thinking about, I guess, US versus Europe versus China, like China is state-led and globally lacking like global trust and adoption. Then you get US and they're pouring money into the infrastructure layer, as you said. So most of the funding is going into just a few foundational model labs. And then you get Europe that's building heavily in the application layer. So I don't think of it as someone's behind. I think it's 3 different tracks and 3 different strategies. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we don't have to. First of all, it's very, very early in this race. We're still in the opening of this whole AI journey. And if you look at what China did with DeepSeek, Europe could clearly have its moment where we leapfrog in terms of capability. There are arguably second and third mover advantages. So training at the very frontier of AI models is incredibly expensive. But if you come in second and third and you think about how you make those technologies valuable and relevant to the economy today, that's something that I think Europe can really lead at. And we have, an amazing manufacturing base, second only to China. We have unique data sets. We have an amazing healthcare system across the continent. So there are talent, there are data sets, and there are ways that we can drive the application and diffusion of this technology through the economy.
So it doesn't matter that we have one foundation model, essentially, in Europe, which is Mistral. I mean, the race to AGI, if the US wins that race, or US companies look best positioned right now to win that race, doesn't that completely upend the dynamic?
Look, I think what you were saying earlier is right. There are 2 different races going on, and the UK is just never going to win the infrastructural race. We're kind of showing up with a pea shooter to a big gunfight. It's just not going to happen. £1 billion versus 500 million just for the US Stargate project. And also the Middle East are coming hard at this as well, right? Saudi and the UAE are spending hundreds of billions of dollars. We just don't have that capital in the UK and in Europe. But what we do have is simply world-class technical talent. So if we can win where it comes down to a race of who's got the best technical talent, who's got the best entrepreneurial talent, we can absolutely win there. And it is no coincidence at all that some of the godfathers of AI, Jan LeCun, Jeffrey Hinton, these are European people. So we've always had the talent. It's about now building the institutions.
We've got to bring them back, Tommy. And you've talked about some of that flow, and you're seeing that as well, Carina.
Yeah, it's fascinating how the brain drain has for many years and generations been flowing more towards the US, and we are seeing signs of that reversing. I was speaking to senior folks at Oxford and Cambridge, and they were saying the applications from the very best and brightest across academia and technology are 10 times more people applying from the US to these top universities that we have here. And we're seeing that across the board with our companies. I think an area where we do find it more difficult in Europe is with that muscle memory of true scale-up, of taking companies to the very biggest outcomes. And often we still have to import that talent, people who've seen that done and have the muscle memory of how that works from Silicon Valley. But it's only a matter of time as we get those exits.
Laura, are you seeing, on the regulatory front, you don't have to go far, you don't have to throw the stone very far within the VC world and the founders world to get complaints about the regulatory burden of Europe. How real is that, and where specifically is the regulatory burden most acute when it comes to the build-out of AI?
Yeah. So it's funny that you called it a burden, because you can also conversely call it a moat.
Sure.
In that a lot of companies building in Europe are privacy first at the jump, which means they appeal more strongly to highly regulated sectors like government, health, finance. And so I actually see starting with compliance controls in place from day one as being a major strength.
We've seen a bit of that too with sort of sovereignty, European sovereignty. We've backed a company called Evrock, which is trying to build a sort of sovereign cloud for Europe. And, that never used to be something people would even want. But now I think people are thinking twice about storing their data in the US. And so I think there are areas where actually this kind of era of sort of broken globalization and nationalism in some ways can help Europe. And we've seen that with defense. We just saw Helsing on the screen, enormous growth in European defense tech as well.
So that sovereignty piece is crucial. Guys, we really appreciate the insights in terms of the talent, in terms of the challenge around exits. Regulation maybe as something of a framer around how these businesses build some resilience in terms of that competition, and, of course, the need for additional capital as well. Carina Namih, partner at Plural, of course, Laura McGinnis, principal at Balderton, and Tommy Stadlen, co-founder of Giant Ventures. Coming up, Europe's leading tech CEO weighs in. Can the continent truly compete then in the global AI race? We've had views in the last couple of minutes ago. We'll get more with the CEO of SAP. It's the most valuable publicly listed company in Europe right now. Christian Klein. That's coming up. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Tech Europe. The SAP story is pronounced. We're going to be hearing from the CEO in the next show. Here's the pivot when it comes to the lean into AI for Christian Klein, the leader now of the most valuable publicly listed company in Europe, leaning into AI back towards the end of 2023, and the stock outperformance is there, and it's consequential. You can see that divide in terms of SAP's performance versus the index. I'm going to be speaking with SAP's CEO, Christian Klein, on the second episode of Bloomberg Tech Europe. Don't miss that exclusive conversation on Friday, July the 11th on Bloomberg. And I'll be hosting a live Q&A with Bloomberg experts on the opportunities and challenges for Europe's innovators in the AI race. Listen in at Bloomberg.com live QA. Terminal and digital subscribers can pose their own questions. That's at 1:30 p.m. UK time. The opening trade is up next. This is Bloomberg.